In the face of globalization, technology is playing a significant role in the context of global development. The question is, where does a small country that is faced with financial difficulties like Thailand fit in that context? How can the sufficiency economy theory be applied in this regard?
Development of the nation must be carried out in stages, starting with the laying of the foundation by helping the majority of the people to face with their immediate problems of having enough to live, enough to eat, through the use of economical means and equipment in accordance with theoretical principles. Once a reasonably firm foundation has been laid and, in effect, higher levels of economic growth and development should be promoted. The above royal address was given in 1973, more than 30 years ago. At that time, not all Thais had a complete notion of what having enough to live, enough to eat meant. But at least the idea was implicitly translated into regular, long-standing practice in His Majesty the King's exemplary working and living principles. The study of His Majesty's activities and royal-initiated projects shows that his concept of sufficiency economy has been implicit ever since the day His Majesty uttered his first royal words. We shall reign with righteousness for the benefits and happiness of the Siamese people. A further study of His Majesty's background shows that actually the theory of sufficiency economy had started early in his life. It was the very philosophy that the Princess Mother tried to instill in her 3 children ever since their young age.
The Princess Mother was very careful in the spending of money and set an excellent example for the royal children. She was the best mother that ever lived. His Majesty was economical in every spending. For example, he would think it over and over before buying a radio set.
A man in khaki uniform turned up one afternoon at a small shoe shop, carefully holding a bag made of plaid cloth.
What do you have in there? I asked him. He stuttered, saying, shoes. Whose then? His Majesty's.
What became vivid to his eyes was something a shoemaker like himself rarely experienced.
He made obeisance before bringing the royal shoes out of the bag for my examination. What I found was a completely worn-out pair of shoes.
After that, many more royal shoes were brought to his shop for repair. Some had been bitten by Tong Dang, His Majesty's favourite dog. Some bore the signs of long years' wear and tear.
From what the court official told me, the king wore that pair of shoes to preside over a military ceremony recently. They were imported shoes that looked so shabby a wealthy Thai would simply hasten to replace. But that was not His Majesty's practice. The shoes were sent here for repair instead. Economizing is practiced in consideration of others, of society, of the world at large. It entails exploiting the resources economically. Take, for example, His Majesty's use of toothpaste. He would squeeze out the tube until there was no paste left. In the context of resources conservation, economizing means zero waste. On the contrary, economizing has no place when it comes to His Majesty's private life. Physical strength, intellectual faculty, Everything is devoted for the good of his subjects.
พลังงานความคิดความอ่านเพื่อประโยชน์ของประชาชน
Towards the beginning of his reign, when the country still faced an advanced technology shortage, His Majesty resorted to an indigenous source in his attempt to stimulate the invention of equipment that would enhance telecommunications with remote areas. In principle, technology is a means to utilize the available resources. Therefore, a good and perfect technology must utilize the resources in the most cost-effective way, whereby minimized waste or damage occurs. At the earlier stage of His Majesty's trips to the countryside to visit his people, it came to his notice that there were disturbances in radio waves used by the members of his entourage, such that communication was completely crippled. It occurred to him that the cause of these might lie in the antennas. Relying on his knowledge of science, which he once studied, His Majesty conducted further studies on his own, as well as held conversations with a number of experts. But the design of antenna, patterned to best upgrade its capacity, was made and tested by His Majesty himself.
The initial phase saw an endless series of tests and adjustments, until finally His Majesty was satisfied with high-capacity antennas.
By theory, the height of antennas should be 50 centimetres, but His Majesty had to modify this in installing them on top of the royal vehicle. The highest capacity of the antennas achieved in the royal tests not only proved to be compatible with the radio transmitter, receiver and transmission line, but also attained a higher standing wave ratio than the international norm, applying among general radio operators.
Normally, the standardized standing wave ratio among radio engineers was 1.5 at best. But His Majesty's was 1.1 or 1.01, which no one had been able to achieve. That's why the ratio came to be known as the Royal Standard.
In proportion to national budget, the price of a radio transmitter receiver 4 decades ago was quite high. But it was a necessity in the context of national development and security. Following preliminary studies, tests and experiments which His Majesty conducted on antennas, he became convinced that the technology could be domestically developed. His Majesty's initiative to upgrade radio antenna capacity, the world's first, was implemented in 1969 by a joint study and research under the auspices of the armed forces and Thai scientists. It was a sunny afternoon when His Majesty appeared at the roof deck of Chitlada Villa, explaining and handing over a list of more than 20 items specifying the sort of radio antennas he needed to Dr. Suti Aksorngit.
As His Majesty was giving me a rundown on the list, my mind was revolving around which text I should look up for reference. But when the list seemed unending, it dawned on me there was no text I could turn to for help.
The main properties of the radio antennas His Majesty specified lie in their compatibility with VHF radio transmitters, receivers, telecommunicating, automatic direction finding, multi-connection with radio communication sets, and minimal power loss during wave propagation.
The universal standard loss allowed is 10%, but His Majesty planned on only 1% loss. As you see, there is a huge difference between 10 and 1%. I was at the end of my wits because, after repeated attempts, I could not achieve anything better than a 5% loss.
His Majesty's specifications had put Dr. Sutti's intellectual potential and academic excellence to the test. In the end, the team's findings showed that the loss in the antenna's propagating capacity was due to oxidization which had tarnished the coated surface of the metal antenna. Their basic solution was to polish the surface until it was shiny again. But it was not long before oxidization reoccurred, and this time the degree of the loss became higher.
I had been pondering on His Majesty's philosophy of sufficiency economy, which many have now been familiar with, when it dawned on me that sometimes a task proved successful through a least costly, unsophisticated method. So I bought a can of cheap lacquer, costing a little more than 20 baht, and used it to coat the surface of the antennas. It was a long-term solution. No more oxidization had since recurred.
ไปทาผิวมันไว้นะตอนนี้ก็เลยไม่หมองเลยทีนี้ก็ใช้ได้ตลอดไป
The antenna, which His Majesty's gave the name Sooty 1, was completed in 1972 and played an important role in the Royal Communications Network to relieve the people's plight and suffering caused by fire, flood and other massive disasters, as well as during the political crisis of 1973.
I am sure many of you still recall the critical moments and how His Majesty was among the first to know where the individual groups were and so on. That's why we could take timely action to remedy the situation. At least he was able to greatly ease the tensions.
More than 3 decades ago, our security forces had to rely on support in the form of small communication equipment with transmitting power of no more than 10 watts from the American organization called USOM. Part of it was army surplus from the Vietnam War, the capacity of which was no longer up to the standard. In His Majesty's opinion, the improvement of the capacity of this communication equipment should be possible, based on indigenous technology. His specifications called for some kind of antennas to enhance radio transmissions between Chitlada Villa in Bangkok and Buping Palace in Chiang Mai Province, using radio sets with transmitting power of no more than 10 watts.
I was taken aback by the royal specifications for radio antennas with a signal range of 600 kilometers and the capacity of no more than 10 watts. How should I proceed? At any rate, I consoled myself with the thought that perhaps I could spend a year or two studying its feasibility.
Given His Majesty's experience gained in preliminary tests, or it could very well be that he had correctly assessed the team's potential, the Royal Command was for a test on the antennas to be performed within 15 to 20 days after that.
I found this very challenging and, by implication, quite feasible. Only a high degree of steadfastness was required of the team. Determined to work it out, we persevered through the following 2 weeks without any sleep.
Finally, in 1974, the Sooty 2 antenna proved successful when installed atop Chitlada Villa and Buping Palace. Radio signals were received from transmitters of no more than 10-watt capacity, despite the signal range of 600 kilometers. Although the Sooty 2 antenna, which had been invented following His Majesty's initiation, proved as effective as planned, radio communication during the royal visits to the people, as well as government officials and security personnel in remote and as yet inaccessible areas, still had not been enhanced. This is due to the oversize of the antenna, Therefore, His Majesty instructed the team to develop a new model of radio antenna, especially for the purpose of telecommunication in mountainous areas.
สายกัดชนิดนี้นะฮะต่อมาท่านพระราชทานชื่อว่าเป็น
His Majesty subsequently called it the Royal Sausage
เป็น
Antenna.
ภาษาอังกฤษด้วยว่า Royal Sausage.
Because of its northeastern Thai sausage shape, His Majesty named it the Royal Sausage Antenna. The idea was to coil up the transmission line in successive circles.
ที่ปลายของไอ้ตัวสาย
We tossed the end piece of the line, which was a bit long, up to the top of a tree. This served as a top quality antenna due to its very wide signal range.
ไปได้ไกลลิบ
When the job is done, we just give it a yank and coil it up again, like cowboys do. So it is highly pliable in forested areas.
เชิงคาร์บอยนะคือใช้งานสะดวกนะฮะใช้ในป่า
The application of radio signal with coiled antenna, or the so-called Royal Sausage Antenna, stemmed from studies of published technical theories on the enhancement of radio signals using tree tops as transmission line, which had never been translated into real practice before.
สิ่งที่น่าสังเกตคือยังไม่เคย
It is worth noting that no one had achieved this signal range in radio communication before. Our capacity was really at the telecommunication level due to the distance or location in remote areas specified by His Majesty's scope of work. The Royal Sausage Antenna model truly reflects his exceptional ingenuity.
พระอัจฉริยภาพของพระองค์ท่านนะฮะ
In compliance with His Majesty's initiations to maximise the efficiency in radio communication and ensure that signals were not cut off even in bad weather, Sooty 3 and Sooty 4 models ensued. Despite the very high commercial value of the various models of Royal-initiated radio antennas, His Majesty opted to make them accessible, free of charge, to many government offices, both civil and military, as well to the Foundation for Volunteer Doctors, under the Princess Mother's patronage for distance medical services. Furthermore, his initiation has proved to help the country save on imported antennas, worth a tremendous amount of money. Given His Majesty's initiation, which was practically orientated, coupled with his all-round profundity in the collection of technical data, dedication and collaboration on the part of the team for the common good, and determination to attain the state of self-reliance on the part of everybody concerned, the outcome was an exemplary accomplishment based on the sufficiency economy approach.
อย่างที่เตี้ยอยู่
What His Majesty has been saying about sufficiency has proved true. If we target our search on very expensive, hardly available items, we will not be able to invent anything.
ไม่สามารถที่จะพัฒนาอะไรขึ้นมาได้
The core principle of sufficiency economy lies in knowing the right step to take. Accelerated action is not sufficiency economy, neither is too slow a pace. One must aim at progress whereby no one is adversely affected. That's sufficiency. I hope you are familiar with it by now. Learn the theory. I've been talking about it for 10 years. It must also be put to practice.
Time has revealed weaknesses in economic, capitalism-orientated theories, be they Adam Smith's or Karl Marx's communism. The outcome of such theories is either too severe or too lax. What we are facing today is good testimony to this. Development that is not based on moderation has brought about abnormal phenomena, such as global warming, acid rain, the greenhouse effect, and an array of diseases. More importantly, human beings are feeling less and less compassion for each other. All of the above are the reasons why we must follow in His Majesty's footsteps along the path of sufficiency economy.
Having travelled to every part of the country to visit his subjects ever since the beginning of his reign, His Majesty gathered first-hand knowledge on the sufferings of the majority of the population living in rural and remote areas. Early on, the target of His Majesty's development philosophy was the needy and how to help them to have enough to live on, enough to eat, so as to ensure that they became self-supporting and ready to take the next steps towards a secure future. Top priority was given to the strengthening of communities so that the people living there would become receptive to the effect of future development.
His Majesty called it an explosion from within, meaning the people within the communities would have to adjust their way of thinking as far as the effect of development was concerned. First and foremost, they should realise the sustainable effectiveness of self-reliance.
It was the basic sufficiency economy theory which His Majesty applied to the new theory in agriculture, with the objective to sustain the livelihood of poor farmers through self-reliance approach, whereby no adverse effects would be suffered by themselves, their fellow human beings, as well as the environment. The sufficiency economy theory underlying all the Royal-initiated development projects does not focus on making the people poor or enhancing their wealth, but tries to provide socio-economic benefits, not only for Thailand, but the world over, whereby everybody has enough to meet his basic needs, i.e. enough to live by, enough to eat, and also enough to render mutual assistance. Therefore, priority is given to both genuine happiness and upgraded economic status.
In human society, priority must be given to happiness as well as compassion. This is essential in the society of mankind. Human beings should not be valued by wealth, but by virtues.
Having secured the state of self-reliance among his subjects, His Majesty further initiated an effective internal immune system at the community level in the form of cooperatives. This constitutes the second phase in the new theory and the advanced practice of sufficiency economy philosophy, whereby farmers consolidate themselves in groups to exchange ideas, collaborate and assist each other for the common good, which proves to benefit not only the community itself, but also national socio-economy. Be that as it may, sufficiency economy has not been specifically designed as a living guideline for the needy or people in the agricultural sector only. The philosophy serves as a guideline on how to live and behave for people at every societal level, to adhere to the middle path, i.e. moderation and rational thinking, and to have adequate immune system against any impact caused by globalization. Only one half of the practice will suffice, not the entire practice, or even 1/4 will do. This means only 1/4 of the whole practice at the national level will be enough. It is what sufficiency economy entails. And when I said even 1/4 will do, I was not talking in terms of space, but of the action.
So, sufficiency economy has to do with how appropriately we lead our lives and conduct our operations. The term implies moderation, appropriateness, well-balanced condition, not too tight nor too lax, not too much nor too little, not too much greed, not developing at too rapid a pace that would exceed our capacity or cause risks.
Thus, the theory can be applied to a wide scope of use, including the global lifestyle and business under the currents of capitalism. Uncle Charon and Aunt Fong Cam La Binta have inherited folk wisdom in making Sa paper for over 4 decades. Their products are widely known and even exported to all parts of the world. Their success has been based on the thirst to learn and profound knowledge necessary to run the business. But more importantly, it is based on the middle path approach and firm belief in moderation. They opted to reject an influx of orders, knowing full well that profit must not exceed production capacity. Otherwise, the products would not meet the quality standard.
2 things are to be adhered to in dealing with foreign customers. One is quality standard and the other is punctuality. If you cannot accept the orders, you must be straight with them. No matter how much money they are willing to pay, moderation is the answer. We will do as much as we can.
Business growth of the Sa Paper Conservation Centre has been gradual but steady. Starting off as a family business, it is now run as a community business, having a workforce of more than 300 representing the people within the community itself and also from nearby communities.
By no means does sufficiency economy conflict with the concept of good business. In fact, it serves to complement it, linking the business or economic concept with goodness, well-balanced judgment, thereby bringing about sustainable growth and security to the business itself.
Aside from moderation and rational thinking, other elements lie implicit in the way that the Sa Paper Conservation Centre is operated. They include long years of experience and profound knowledge, ethical principles and honesty which constitute the essence of sufficiency economy.
On the combination of knowledge and ethics, I can say that in-depth knowledge provides a measure against risks, while ethics provides a shield to protect our business.
If our needs have been satisfied, our greed will diminish. With diminished greed, we will cause less trouble for others. In a non-economic sense, if every country is convinced that sufficiency, meaning moderation, should be applied to everything it does, avoiding going to extremes or having excessive greed, people will be happy. A life guided by sufficiency can tolerate abundance or luxuries. But the main idea is we must not cause trouble for others and should base our actions always on moderation appropriate for our individual circumstances.
In times of economic crisis, many business operators whose business administration principles were in line with the theory of sufficiency economy admitted that they staggered a bit but were not caught in a slump due to the solid foundation of their business. This exactly coincided with His Majesty's perception that, comparatively speaking, every business relies on the foundation piles comprising good customer relations on the one hand and good business partner relations on the other. Even if the upper part of the structure was shaken, the piles managed to stay intact, so the business would never collapse.
Sufficiency economy teaches people to take account of all contributing factors and their consequences before taking any action. To aim only at positive outcome without considering the possible negative result is not in keeping with the concept of sufficiency.
First, the husband will have to mortgage the farmland he owns. With the money, he can proceed to find employment overseas. Once he gets paid, he sends money to his wife, so that she can buy food for the family. Don't you think this is crazy? Their basic mentality has got to change. So I say sufficiency economy is the remedy for poverty.
I would like to stress that sufficiency economy means both economic system and behaviour or action taken because we want something to happen. Our action must be supported by both cause and effect. A cause bears on its effect, and the effect is a result of the action that causes it. In other words, good actions bring about good effects, which are also good actions. Good means effective, beneficial, causing happiness. Despite the past economic crisis, a mega-sized organisation such as the Siam Cement Group has managed to withstand them all. What measures have been set up to provide this organisation with an immune system against risks from external factors for almost a century? The answer lies in the human resources management that reflects sufficiency economy, whereby personnel development receives first priority in the context of long-term organisational preparedness. Strengthened human resources are the key to the immune system, which constitutes long-term organisational stability.
Our main objective is to not make a short-term profit, but to attain long-term, sustainable development. An organisation that operates along this line of thinking will not adopt a sensational type of management, but progress slowly and steadily while concentrating on strengthening its internal components, such as the one concerning its human resource. Our clear-cut ideology is that the human resource is our valuable asset. Besides, it is our philosophy, which has been strictly adhered to all along, that quality and ethical principle must go hand in hand.
Logical reasoning, according to His Majesty the King's sufficiency economy theory, must be controlled by intelligence, thoroughness and carefulness.
Tens of thousands of medium and small-sized new enterprises are registered annually, and the number is increasing. But many of them went out of business in no time. Thailand can see a larger number of prosperous entrepreneurs if they base their businesses or business strategies on the philosophy of sufficiency economy. As a result, I'm convinced that more SMEs will attain sustainable, long-term success in the future, so that the country will not suffer a great loss in national resources due to a rapid business crash.
Some might consider the numerous capital-intensive mega-sized projects worth tens of billions of baht as conflicting with the sufficiency economy approach, but in fact His Majesty once referred to it as a progressive approach. An instance of this is the project to build the Ba Sak Jolasid Dam. This is progressive sufficiency economy. Sufficiency in that, once accomplished, many parties will become involved. On the whole, it will benefit everyone and development will come out of it. If the farmers are in trouble, the impact will be felt in Bangkok. Similarly, large-sized projects or economies must rely on good coordination. They cannot simply copy the new theory covering 15 rai of land, which is taken only in the context of growing enough rice to eat. But sufficiency economy can similarly be applied in bigger projects, such as the Ba Sak Jolasid Dam, which is based on modern economy but has not deviated from sufficiency economy. In fact, this represents a positive example. Public donations provide the impetus for a good number of royal-initiated projects. The practice represents a concrete form of sufficiency in the Thai society.
Just the intention to help others makes us happy, and knowing that other people are trying to help us also brings us happiness. So, mutual assistance brings happiness to both sides. It is common happiness.
We never know when we will be in trouble. When we are, we normally hope other people will help us. But when we are not in trouble, the people who are will hope in the same way as we do. so we should help them. If one day we find ourselves in trouble, we can be guaranteed that they will help us. This can be regarded as a principle of insurance or even social security.
In presenting the award to His Majesty, Mr. Kofi Annan, Secretary-General of the United Nations, commended the sufficiency economy theory as an outstanding development approach that can be applied for use the world over. So, we Thais should be proud that the theory was originated in Thailand and receives global recognition. We should, therefore, be even more strongly motivated to attain success in implementing it in our own country, so as to aspire other nations to follow suit. The result will surely benefit all mankind.
เป็นตัวอย่างหรือว่าเป็นตัวกระตุ้นให้สิ่งที่ดีนั้นเกิดในประเทศอื่นๆด้วยแล้วก็จะเกิดผลดีร่วมกันสำหรับมนุษยชาติ
It has been 6 decades under His Majesty the King's reign. The country's growth and prosperity revolving around the concept of sufficiency has been witnessed not only by Thais but by the entire world. As testimony to our cultural heritage dating back hundreds of years are the glorious sites of our ancient royal traditions and historic sites. During the elaborate state banquet His Majesty hosted in honour of the royal well-wishers, intricate products from the Royal Project and Her Majesty the Queen's Support Foundation proudly presented themselves as testimony to the great success of His Majesty's initiatives in sustainable development, as well as conservation and confirmation of sustained fertility of the land. This small kingdom on the global map had an opportunity to host kings, queens and royal leaders, representatives from all over the world. Thanks to His Majesty the King's unrivaled benevolence and righteousness, the honour of our entire nation has been concretely signified in the presence of the royal dignitaries. The fact that His Majesty is a direct descendant of a great king is not the only reason why he has won faith and loyalties of his subjects. The contributing factors are manifold: the strenuous royal burden, the great perseverance in eradicating the people's sufferings, the unconditioned compassion and love for which not enough could be done in return. These factors are attributes in his elevated status as superhuman or demigod, capable of unifying millions and millions of people together.
His Majesty is the Lord of the land, in the real sense of the words, not one that takes advantage of the land. So, he has won the people's genuine and heartfelt love and respect, as Lord of life, as Father, as King. No one can deny the fact that His Majesty the King has done great things for the people and the country, for which we all feel gratitude to him. To express to him our deep sense of gratitude, nothing could be better than leading our lives along the path that His Majesty has shown us, because it is the key to sustain the country's, as well as the people's prosperity, happiness, integrity and honour, just as the world came to witness last June 2006. Let us all start our life and working styles in observing His Majesty's sufficiency philosophy so as to ensure a sufficient but perfectly endowed future.